getting better relationship skills, because if you haven't been taught it from when you're young, you don't have the habits, you don't have the know-how how to do it.
It is a good point that these are skills that people can actually acquire, they can learn, but it would seem that like even in schools, they teach young people, they're more interested in teaching young people about sex, functionality of sex and
But
sexuality,
not the
less
emotional.
about the
The
emotional side
emotional,
of, or the
yeah.
relational side, and how to kind of like
And
take care of their own well-being and to deal with
and that's
themselves.
the most important part of it, because the emotional is what impacts a lot of people. Because isn't it, for a lot of people, their first relationship in their teenage years may form how they deal with relationships going down in the future.
True. Very possible. Very
So
possible.
if your relationship, when you were, your first relationship ended very badly, it was a very bad experience, then, because I know I had a lot of male friends back in the day, and a lot of them was always about, they had a really bad experience when they were in their teens, so they don't trust women anymore. I gave her everything, and then I don't trust her no more. You don't trust women anymore. So if your first, and then same thing with women as well.
Women can be very much the same, right? They can close down.
And women the same thing. Yeah. My first relationship was like, it was really bad. It was a really bad experience. So from then, and you end up then meeting the same person. You keep meeting the same person over and over again, not realizing that you're dating the same person, but just different phase and different name. And you haven't actually healed from that relationship. And so
wash, spin, rinse and repeat, I think they call that.
Rinse and repeat. So I don't trust men. I don't trust women. I don't trust, because you're just rinsing and repeating, because you haven't taken the time out to heal. So we can't tell people you need to do this if you don't know there's actually a skill in building relationships and dealing with relationships and healing from relationships. Is actually a skill you have to learn. And if you don't have it, and you haven't learned it or observed it, or even if you haven't observed healthy relationships as well, that's another thing. A lot of people don't observe healthy relationships. So they don't even know what a model looks like. Wow. They don't even know what it looks like, because no one's modeled it to them. So how are you going to know what's a healthy relationship if you've never actually seen it in practice? Hollywood and TV like to show us this kind of funky version of relationships that doesn't actually exist. So that's where
what we're seeing a lot of as well, just to add on to that, Lady Essie, is because of social media and the media in general, but what we're doing is looking at a lot of famous people's relationships. And then I think that a lot of young people, when I say young, like maybe the under 25s, are quite inspired or quite influenced by, I use that word, by influencers, right? But more like influenzas, more like flipping, I don't know, there's sickness, but like these people that, because they've got 1 million subscribers, or because they've sung a pop record, or they starred in a film, or they're more interested in love and hip hop and Cardi B and whoever whatever the artist is. But at the end of the day, they're people. But are those people, apart from being wealthy and well known, are they psychologically healthy? Like, are they whole? Are they resolved in some of their issues? Or it's just that they have money and a platform, so that's why they're looked at as role models. You know what I mean? But what are they modeling? In other words, what are they modeling? I'm not saying they're bad people, but what are they modeling? What skills do they have that would make you think confidently, would feel confident about taking ideas from them?
I guess because they've been successful in that area of their life, because we have to remember, in our lives as humans, we're complex beings, and we have different areas of our life where you may have success in one particular area. Like if you're an art, like you said, an influencer has success in that area. Maybe they've acknowledged their gifts, they know their zone of genius, they've gone out there, they've made their money because they've operated wherever. However, they may not have great relationship skills because they never learned it. Whereby you may have your grandmother who had amazing relationship skills, but she didn't have no money. So you're not looking at her as modeling because you didn't see her skills as something worth modeling or observing.
Exactly. The elders around you could be much more equipped than somebody.
Exactly. But because society doesn't say that's successful. Like for me, it's when my grandma passed back in 2020, and I went for her funeral, and that was the first time I realized about the importance of relationships. I'm like, she was a model in building relationships. Like she had it locked down. Like her skills in building relationships was like second to none. However, you wouldn't have seen it because you wouldn't have seen it as that successful, but actually, like, that is success, to be able to have relationships with everybody of every generation and every age. That is successful. So and
but your grand would be much more qualified, was much more qualified than than
You know,
Nicki Minaj, but you're supposed to not adhere to that generational
exactly,
wisdom. You're supposed to
exactly.
look online to Nicki
But
or the likes of Nicki.
because relationships take work. They're not going to just work because you wish it to work. It's about how do you communicate. Like I had to do I mean, I'm a Toastmaster, so I'm also in a Toastmaster club. So my public speaking and my speech yesterday was on communication style. What is your communication style? And I don't think a lot of people know how they communicate. What is their communication style? What is your partner's communication style? Do you know how to listen? Do you know how to observe? How do you think? How do you actually take information in? Are you always mishearing things and making up your own, filling in the gaps that the person never said, and going, this is what you meant when they didn't. So, it's all those extra things that we don't realize go into relationships. How are you communicating? Because if you're a direct communicator, for example, you're very blunt and to the point, and somebody else is a little bit more flowery and likes to kind of do that, hey, how you doing, you're right, and you're in an argument, it's always going to come out like the direct person's being rude. But they're not being rude, right? That's how they communicate. They're used to being very direct. And if you're someone who's not really used to the direct communication, but you haven't taken the time to know that, you're always going to go, wow, that person's always rude, my partner's rude. Like they're feisty.
And
But they're not.
sometimes the other you talked about the communication skills, not just about how you articulate yourself, but the listening skill.
How
Because
you listen? Yeah, your listening skills. How are
particularly
you listening?
intimate partner relationships, marital relationships, romantic relationships, I mean, that is a challenge, right? Because there's passion involved, right? So when there's conflict or dispute, right, people are easily triggered. So it means when your wife is talking to you, she's telling you about something, and maybe she says it in a way that she spoke in a way and huffed and rolled her eyes a couple of times. So you're already on the edge, or vice versa, right? Or she's feeling a certain way because you raised your voice, or you came across a certain way. So after that, nobody ain't really listening to understand what the next person is really saying. They're just waiting for the other person to take a pause in their breath so they can come. Yeah, but what about the time when you? Because it's a rebuttal time now. This is not really communication and conversation. This is more debate. This is more. I'm communicating with you to understand. I'm communicating with you to express a point. Oh no, I'm none of those. At this moment in time, I'm communicating with you to win. I'm trying to come out on top to prove you wrong and I am right, and not really understand how you feel as a person.
And that is, I think when I studied NLP, that was one of the things I learned is like, do you want to be right or do you want to be connected? And that was one of my most powerful learnings that I ever learned. Like, do you want to be right or do you want to be connected? Wow. Oh, wow. Okay. You can be right, but you're going to be disconnected. So in our relationships, we have to be very intentional. We actually have to make it part of our learning goals. How do we become better people in our relationships, not just our romantic ones, even with our family, with our
across
colleagues,
the board? Across the board.
How do we become better relationships? Because then that limits that feeling of loneliness, because you know how to connect with others. Because being lonely means you don't know how to connect. You've never learned the skills to learn how to connect and stay connected, and how to reconnect if you disconnect.
Exactly. Re-engage. That's to re-engage, isn't it?
Yeah, and a lot of people don't
you use a phrase. What did you say? You said relationships are work.
Yeah, they are work.
Across the board, not just romantic, not just marriage, not just romance, but across the board. Mother and son, adult mom and adult son, like parent and child, siblings, friendship. They these things take work, because it's easy to just get upset, get pushed, and say, you know what, I can't be dealing with that, and disengage.
And I think what's happened now as well with social media, especially, like I feel this kind of cut people off. How are you?
Disengage in it, run. So you never develop the skill of how to mend fractures and make alliances better. We're just supposed to the left, swipe, move on, move across.
But you can't though. That's not how life works. That's not how things work. That's not how we are built. You don't just, unless obviously you're in danger, the person's committed, those situations where you have to. And if they're a stranger, then you haven't invested any time with this person. Fair enough. And I mean, I always said, you see, like the Premier League, how I describe relationships are like, it's like football. If you're into football, you have your Premier League relationships, yeah. Those are the ones you need to work on very well. But if the person gets relegated to the next division, you still got work on it, but you don't have to put as much. And you need to know where you put people in your lives. That's where your boundary setting is. You need to know where everybody's sitting. because not every relationship you need to work on as much as others. But if you know, like, you got friends where you only see them every 6 months and you're, all right, blah, blah. You don't have to do too much. But you know what? You know each other for a little while, you're kind of connected, but it doesn't require too much maintenance because you just know each other through the ends, innit? So it's just like, you're all right, you're good. It's like neighbors, isn't it? Some neighbors, you don't really ever speak to them, but you just keep it warm. You just keep it okay. You see,
a polite courtesy, just out of courtesy.
It doesn't require much work. Nothing. It's never really going to have too much trouble. But then you got certain people that it might be a bit turbulent, but you need to learn how to make it work because they're quite important in terms of where they sit.
Yeah.
And so, and even sometimes, even in your partner relationship, sometimes you may have to learn how do you separate but be still harmonious. If you have to be, because you're still connected with each other for certain reasons, you may still have to be connected because you may still have the same friendship groups.
Awkward.
You may have awkward. You may kind of work together. You may have children together. You may have other connections. You know what I mean? So how do you keep it harmonious and like civil in order to kind of maneuver? And that's where I think we've got to not be so hard on, like, the gender wars are like, yeah, men need to do better because it's all their fault why relationships don't work. It takes two. I always used to say to my siblings, like when they do arguments, I'm like, you can't argue with yourself.
True.
You can't argue with yourself. It takes two people to argue. So it has to be from both sides. It can't be just one person in a relationship is the one causing all the problems. It has to be two people in it. Yeah, one might be a bit better and one may not work as well. But ultimately, it's always going to take two people for a relationship not to work. Because by yourself, even if yourself is hard work, right?
How do you treat, if you ask people to take an inventory, how do you treat yourself? I'm nice. Of course I'm good to myself. And you actually go for an inventory or form to say, how often do you exercise? What is your meal plan like? What is your sleep hygiene like? When was the last time you did something specifically just for yourself to be? People get to find out that, boy, if it was I wouldn't even treat an enemy like the way I treat myself, much less dealing with other people. So it does go deep. It does go deep.
And how are you talking to yourself? Are you the one? Are you cussing yourself in your head? Are you and the same way you're talking to other people?
Is it inner critic? Is it inner critic raging and winning, or like the one that the nurturing self, the side of you that says, I make mistakes, I'm fallible, but I'm worthy. Do you know what I mean? Or is it the side that says you're so useless?
Exactly. So the fact of the matter is, it comes down to, until you've kind of developed a great enough foundational relationship with yourself, which, because we're always works in progress, it can always get better. I kind of call it that circle of self-knowledge. You have to get to know yourself and really spend time getting to know yourself. Then you got to have self-awareness, because once you know yourself, you need to be aware of your blind spots and your gaps and all the other bits of yourself that other people might tell you about, but you don't want to acknowledge. But then you've got to be like honest and go, yeah, I'm a little bit like that, you know them bits. And then you've got to be accepting of all of yourself, those bits of yourself that you ain't changing, because that is it. So you got to accept that's how you are. Then you've got to be a little bit self-forgiving, right? And compassion towards yourself. And then you can kind of, that feeds into your self-love. So once you can reach that kind of stage, dealing with other people becomes a lot easier. Because you know what skills and tools to pick out to deal with whoever you got to pick out, because you become more of a listener and observer. Because if you've got someone who's a little bit highly strung, you know that I ain't going to deal with this person when I'm tired and hungry. Because I'm tired and hungry today. So, you get some people when they call you, you're like, I don't think I can manage the phone call with this person today because I'm not in the mood for them. Because it's going to end up an argument, right? Don't answer the phone to them, innit?
Yeah. It's just like, if your self-awareness lets you know, I'm not a moaning person. So usually, unless it's business and it's important, I don't answer my calls or whatever, or I might text, but I'll get back at you.
Exactly. So what I'm saying, but that self-awareness will help. That's helpful in your relationship thing, because if like you said, if you're not a morning person, but your partner's a morning person, so you may have to find a common ground and go, let's not have a conversation to 10 o'clock, yeah?
Yeah.
Because by 10 o'clock, I'm good. And by 10 o'clock, you're good. So by 10 o'clock, that's a nice little reasonable time for us to have a discussion. But anything before that ain't going to work.
Yeah.
Even though you're a morning person. So it might be your self-awareness will allow you then to find the tools then to be able to get to that relationship thing a little bit better. So it's really about how we work on ourselves very well and keep working on ourselves so that we can have better relationships with each other. Because You know, really and truly, especially in our community, family is the backbone of how we are going to community build. We have to learn how to build community, but you can only build community by knowing how to build relationships. And if you don't know how to build relationships, you can never build community. And it's
But
always going
do
to
you
be
think though?
difficult.
Let me question you then on that. Do you think that that's where we are in the community, if we want to use that phrase, right? For those who know what that means, right? Like in a sense of, or are we more focused on ideology? Do we think that it's ideology and what do you call it again? Identity politics, for example, that's gonna get us to build
No,
community, or is it love, respect, understanding,
it's love,
communication,
respect, and
listening?
community. We've been focused on the ideology. Yeah, it's been community. The ideology comes with it, but if you ain't building community, the ideology is not gonna, it's not gonna hold up, is it?
Okay.
And sometimes it might be even, I may not check for you, I may not even like you, but you know what? We've got a common goal we've got to achieve. So you know what? I'm gonna put aside my ego because we just got to achieve this. I mean, you know, as when you're on radio and sense, you know, you got to work with certain people, you may have to work with someone. You don't even your vibe, you don't even like them energy, you don't even like anything, but you got an event to do, so you got to work together in it. You got to get it done. Are you gonna let things not work because all about work? You've got colleagues that you do not like,
I was
right?
about to say it's like that in most companies and organizations in
Yeah,
terms of
because
employment,
people
right?
you
There's
don't
people you
like.
can't stand, right?
But you have to work together to get the goal done. You're not going to go because you need to get paid, right? Are you going to, because you need to get stuff done. So you put aside your animosity so that you can work and get things done. And you know how much you can take from that person, how much they can take from you. But you get it together and you achieve the goal, yeah, because you got to achieve the goal. But at the end of the day, you need to get paid. We manage it in workplaces because a lot of us do not like who we work with. But we're
That's what I'm
in a
saying. That's what
workplace
I'm
for
saying.
10,
When it comes
15,
to
20 years.
employment and business organizations, most of us, the 99.9% of us, kind of take that as a given that there'll be people there that we really don't like, but we find a amicable space. Obviously, there's conflict in the workplace, but we find a space to kind of function and to be, you know, like to have a certain
Exactly.
level of etiquette and just get on with it because, you know, it's business. So we have the capacity to do that. But you know, how much
So,
we do that in family and friendship circles, to be willing to.
that's what we have to learn to do. And I feel we have to sometimes go back to basics. And if you find you have not very great family and friendship relationship groups, you can't be out there going community building if you can't build community if your first community.
Charity begins at home, you know.
Charity begins at home.
Charity begins at home.
If you ain't building community with your first community or people, you can't be out there telling other people to build community. Fix that community first, then
No,
go build
absolutely.
the next community.
Absolutely true. I got to say that's a good point to conclude our conversation. And the time has gone so quick, lady. But you know what? After some things has come to my mind that I have to get you back real soon because Married at First Sight is on seconds. I think it's the second season, whatever series it is, but the new series, the series right now, as we say in September 2020, the new series just come out. We're gonna have to chop up a few episodes because there's a few interesting characters in that.
All right.
Psychoanalysis for some neuro-linguistic programming review, and there's quite a few Black people in that program as well. So as well as from a mainstream point of view, but also from a Black point of view, it'd be interesting to have a conversation about those relationship dynamics. And I'm sure that our listeners to this podcast would leave a comment if they would like to hear us discuss Married at First Sight in some more detail. But I really got to get you back for that, Lady Essie. But I really appreciate you coming by, man, and spending the time.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been a great conversation, and I'll be catching up with Married at First Sight.
Good stuff. Good stuff. It's always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. And to my viewers, to my listeners of the High Caliber Man podcast, remember to like, share, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and stay safe till next episode. Peace.